Something historic has just taken place on the world stage, and it happened with Canada at the center. At the APEC Summit 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney sat down with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And in that single meeting, Canada's role in global politics may have been redefined. This was the first time in 8 years that a Canadian leader met face-to-face with China's president. But what stood out wasn't the handshake, the cameras, or the protocol. It was the atmosphere. While Xi's meeting with Donald Trump once felt stiff, tense, and guarded, his conversation with Mark Carney was warm, open, and surprisingly relaxed. That contrast told the world everything it needed to know. Mark Carney has transformed Canada's global image from a quiet observer to a decisive global player, and now the world is responding.
Mr. President, it is a pleasure to meet you again and to meet you for the first time in my capacity as Prime Minister. I had the great pleasure of attending, amongst other meetings in China, the G20, over which you presided, at a time of great hope for the international system and great progress under the banner of the G20. I look forward to further progress with your presidency of APEC next year. As you mentioned, our countries have a long history of cooperation, engagement, and trade. 55 years of diplomatic relations marked the anniversary 2 weeks ago. In recent years, we have not been as engaged. In fact, as you know, this is the first formal meeting between the Canadian Prime Minister and the President of the People's Republic of China for 8 years. Distance is not the way to solve problems, not the way to serve our people with people-centric growth, as you have advocated. Pragmatic and constructive engagement is, and I welcome the momentum that has been established.
The moment was subtle, yet undeniably historic. 2 world leaders seated across from each other, one representing the planet's most populous nation, the other symbolizing a country that has quietly emerged as a model of stability and influence. But for Prime Minister Mark Carney, this wasn't just another diplomatic photo opportunity. It was the restoration of trust, a revival of a relationship that had remained frozen for nearly a decade. When President Xi Jinping welcomed him, the tone was unmistakably different from anything witnessed in recent years. There were smiles, controlled laughter, and a visible air of mutual respect filling the room. This was not how China received the leadership of Trump's America anymore. This was how China greeted Canada under Mark Carney. It wasn't about size or power. It was about credibility, and Carney brought that credibility back to the table in a way no Canadian leader had done in years. Let's take a step back. For nearly 8 years, Canada's relationship with China was frozen. High-level communication was minimal, diplomatic dialogue stalled, and trade talks had nearly disappeared. Why? Because for years, Washington preferred it that way. The United States wanted Canada to stay dependent, economically, politically, and strategically, ensuring that any path to Beijing ran through Washington first. It was a structure based on control, not cooperation. But Mark Carney is rewriting that script. In less than a year, he's achieved what few believed possible, reopening the door, and not by yielding, but by leading. He approached Beijing not as a junior partner seeking favor, but as an equal nation, one with real value to offer: innovation, stability, and strategic access to Western markets. This was Canada stepping forward, not as a reflection of Washington's agenda, but as a confident, independent power charting its own course. And this time, China noticed.
I also welcome the invitation to come to China to further the dialogue, and I very much look forward to doing so, because it's through this constructive and pragmatic dialogue that we will address a path for current issues, that we will establish a road to seize the many great opportunities between our countries, and also to have the platform that's needed for the dialogue to help build a more sustainable, inclusive international system.
At that very same summit, President Xi Jinping also met with Donald Trump, and the contrast couldn't have been clearer. When Xi sat down with Trump, his body language was stiff, his tone controlled and cautious. The two exchanged words, but not warmth, a transactional encounter defined by rivalry rather than partnership. But just hours later, when Xi met Mark Carney, the atmosphere shifted entirely. There was ease, there was laughter, and there was something rarely seen in high-level diplomacy, genuine rapport. The image of Xi leaning in toward Carney, smiling, spoke louder than any official statement. It was a powerful visual, a sign that Carney's Canada has become the kind of nation even global superpowers want to engage with. And just as significantly, it highlighted how isolated Trump's America has become. For Beijing, the message was unmistakable. Canada now stands for stability, predictability, and principle, the very qualities Washington no longer projects. What we're witnessing is the realization of a long-term vision, one that Mark Carney outlined quietly upon taking office. His strategy was never about confrontation, it was about connection. While Trump burned bridges, Carney built them. While others chased short-term headlines, Carney focused on lasting partnerships. From Southeast Asia to Europe and across sectors from energy to technology, Canada now finds itself at the center of new trade frameworks, all designed to move away from the volatility of Washington's politics. And now, China, the world's second-largest economy, is signaling it wants to be part of that narrative. This isn't about choosing sides between East and West. It's about restoring balance, ensuring Canada's economy and diplomacy no longer rise or fall with America's mood swings.
This meeting today is long overdue. It has been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister has met with the President of China. We now have a turning point in the relationship, a turning point that creates opportunities for Canadian families, for Canadian businesses, and Canadian workers, and also creates a path to address current issues. So very pleased with the outcome of the meeting.
Then came the moment that truly shifted the tone of the entire summit. As their meeting concluded, President Xi Jinping extended an invitation to Prime Minister Mark Carney, an official state visit to China. That invitation was far more than a courtesy. For Beijing, it was a calculated diplomatic move, a clear signal that Canada's role on the global stage has been renewed and recognized. For Mark Carney, it was validation, proof that his measured strategic diplomacy is beginning to pay off. In the world of foreign affairs, such an invitation is nothing short of a standing ovation, not for what Canada once was, but for what it's becoming, a nation of growing influence and undeniable potential.
In his remarks, Xi congratulated Carney for becoming Prime Minister and noted that China-Canada relations have achieved a recovery and momentum towards positive development. Xi also invited Carney for a state visit, which the Prime Minister has accepted.
Carney's meeting with President Xi Jinping marks more than just diplomacy. It's part of a much larger realignment. He's positioning Canada as the bridge, the nation that global powers can depend on when others can't be trusted. While Donald Trump continues to alienate allies and insult long-standing partners, Mark Carney is weaving a network of relationships that give Canada influence,
no matter which way global politics shift. This is the strategy behind the handshake. Every new partnership across Asia and Europe strengthens Canada's independence and quietly erodes Washington's dominance. That's why this meeting matters far beyond the walls of APEC. It signals that the global balance of respect is shifting, and Canada now stands on the right side of that shift. On the surface, it looked like a meeting about trade, but beneath it, it was about leadership. Xi Jinping recognizes that Carney represents a different breed of Western leader, one who sees diplomacy not as confrontation, but as calculation. And Carney understands that in today's geopolitical landscape, Canada's true power lies in credibility. Every handshake, every photograph, every word exchanged carried the same message. Canada is no longer defined by its proximity to America, but by its principles. And that's where Carney and Trump diverge completely. Where Trump seeks control through threats and pressure, Carney earns influence through trust and consistency. And in this era of uncertainty, trust travels farther than fear ever will. This wasn't just another diplomatic formality. It was the confirmation of Carney's meeting with President Xi marks more than just diplomacy. It's part of a much larger realignment. He's positioning Canada as the bridge, the nation that global powers can depend on when others can't be trusted. While Donald Trump continues to alienate allies and insult long-standing partners, Mark Carney is weaving a network of relationships that give Canada influence, no matter which way global politics shift. This is the strategy behind the handshake. Every new partnership across Asia and Europe strengthens Canada's independence and quietly erodes Washington's dominance. That's why this meeting matters far beyond the walls of APEC. It signals that the global balance of respect is shifting, and Canada now stands on the right side of that shift. On the surface, it looked like a meeting about trade, but beneath it, it was about leadership. Xi Jinping recognizes that Carney represents a different breed of Western leader, one who sees diplomacy not as confrontation, but as calculation. And Carney understands that in today's geopolitical landscape, Canada's true power lies in credibility. Every handshake, every photograph, every word exchanged carried the same message. Canada is no longer defined by its proximity to America, but by its principles. And that's where Carney and Trump diverge completely. Where Trump seeks control through threats and pressure, Carney earns influence through trust and consistency. And in this era of uncertainty, trust travels further than fear ever will. This wasn't just another diplomatic formality. It was the confirmation of a new global role for Canada. For decades, the nation was seen as the quiet partner, reliable, polite, but rarely leading. That perception is over. Under Mark Carney, Canada has become the balancing force between East and West, the country that can sit across from both Washington and Beijing and command respect from each. In a world fractured by ego and ideology, Carney's Canada offers something rare: clarity. And that clarity is exactly what the global system has been waiting for. As cameras flashed and the two leaders exchanged smiles, one truth became impossible to ignore: Canada is back. In less than a year, Mark Carney has repositioned his country from a regional ally to a global influence, respected in Beijing, trusted in Brussels, and increasingly envied in Washington. Xi Jinping's warmth towards Carney was mere diplomacy. It was respect. And his coolness toward Trump was not just personal, it was symbolic. It symbolized a new order, one where the world no longer looks exclusively to Washington for direction, but increasingly to countries like Canada for example and balance. Carney's meeting with Xi wasn't a side note to the summit, it was a turning point. a moment that historians may one day mark as the point when Canada stopped following and started leading. And if Washington's frustration is any sign, Carney's strategy isn't just working, it's winning. Because while Donald Trump clings to the past, Carney is already shaping the future. You're watching Canada Newsline, independent, factual, and unapologetically Canadian. Subscribe to stay informed as we continue covering the stories redefining our nation's place in the world.